It's my regular guest on Monday PM, on Thursday. Partners in Torah. Dooovid and I usually discuss politics as it intersects with Judaism and Israel. Dooovid, what's going on today?
Thank God. I had a good Rosh Hashanah. I guess I've been doing liquid fast so far today. The old Tzam Gedalia, minor Hebrew fast day after the Rosh Hashanah. They had outdoor minyan at the local Young Israel, so I went to Young Israel for prayer services. Both days. Heard the shofar. Looked like people were being pretty careful about COVID-19. A lot of doctors and medical professionals. Kind of what I said. The good people of America manning their posts, doing our jobs as the sink ships, as the God forbid the ship sinks. So the local Jews, a lot of professionals, just doing our jobs, and tough to know what's going on in the greater world. And even though it appears that bad things are coming.
Dooovid, do we as Jews believe in the afterlife?
I mean, generally, yes, although it's not a fundamental belief. So, like Maimonides' 13 principles, the belief in Messiah and resurrection of the dead. So resurrection of the dead is a fundamental belief of Judaism that doesn't necessarily have a take on the afterlife. So, I mean, it could be that there is no afterlife. So to say, we die and the soul or whatever enlivens our body is connected with the body and then resurrects, or there's a separate realm, reincarnation, transmigration of the souls, or heaven and hell. Generally, most of the sages believe in afterlife and souls, but it's not a fundamental belief of Judaism.
Now, the reason I ask is because, I recently had a pretty in-depth conversation with a Christian friend, and this guy's very religious and very devout, and he is like, I don't like to use the word obsessed, but I would say he's very focused on the afterlife, and that everything that we do now is going to lead to this kind of utopian afterlife in heaven. And he's kind of proselytizing a bit there. You want to come to the afterlife, you have to do it through Jesus. Let's put that aside. I don't want to get into that, but it did make me wonder, what do we believe regarding the afterlife? And, I know a little about it. I think you're right about the resurrection of the dead. That's in the prophet Ezekiel. But I was, looking at the Rosh Hashanah text, as I am wont to do during the service in English, looking for something that would talk about this. And my sense was that on Rosh Hashanah, we're asking for forgiveness, we're asking for redemption, we're asking for salvation, but it's not exactly an afterlife sort of a thing. It's more like we want to ask for forgiveness of our sins now. We're asking God to humbly forgive us for the sins and the errors that we've made over the past year, so that we can be redeemed and that we can be saved. And it does use the word saved in our own lifetime. And it's very much focused on life. And you want to enter into another year of the book of life. And I only saw one reference to an afterlife in the service. And again, I didn't do a deep dive here. We're talking about looking at the English during the service. And that is toward the end of the mincha, the afternoon service of Rosh Hashanah, when the Amida, and it talks about, the soul reposing, after, forever, and, after, and it does mention the afterlife more explicitly than anywhere else that I've seen. So, I think that it's safe to say that Judaism is a religion of works as much as it's a religion of faith, in that we believe that you have to do good and that you have to disavow evil, and you have to know what's evil, and you have to ask God to tell you and to direct you to know what's evil so you can disavow it. And if you do fall into it, because it's very tempting sometimes, you ask for forgiveness at this time of the year. And part of that is coming to reckoning with the fact that you did it, and that it's recognizing what is evil, it's recognizing your role in it, and then it's asking forgiveness. And in the case of actually having damaged another person, it's asking them for forgiveness. And not only asking them for forgiveness, but offering to do something in this world to try to approximate a making of it right. We cannot go back in time. I mean, in a way, in our secular system, we have a system of justice which brings compensation for crime if you do something wrong, and usually that compensation is monetary. So you have to not only ask for forgiveness and then receive it from the other person, but then you have to offer to do something to make it right. What's your take on that, Dooovid?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed many times your kind of historical approach to Judaism as opposed to I call the anachronization, that what Jews believe today, the rabbis will usually propose that that's what Jews always believed, even if the evidence in terms of textual or archaeological isn't there. So certainly there's not a huge focus on the afterlife in Judaism. That's one of the innovations of the New Testament, and Jesus talking about the afterlife. And you might be hard to find a rabbi who's going to say there is no afterlife. That's not one of our beliefs, or even Hebrew scholars, Israeli, so to say, heretical mainstream university scholars who would propose that no, in the ancient Israel we didn't believe in the afterlife, although we did believe in the resurrection of the dead, and even a concept of the soul, what the ancient Israel concept of the soul was, if we even had one. So, I mean, that's probably beyond this conversation. I've done a lot of research, and we've talked about this a few times. And, as a Jew, as a religious Jew, it's tough to be objective on, the evidence that's available. And then if you're going to say certain mainstream beliefs that, say we took possibly from other cultures and adapted, such as a belief in the afterlife. But, certainly the focus of getting along together with fellow man under the subservience of one God, the God of Jehovah. There's certainly a ton of references to the temple and rebuilding the temple, and but Judaism. We got Claire Caw here in the chat. Was a religion of law, and law between man and man, and man and God. And the high holidays are very, so to say, practical about that you got to be on good with God. God controls the whole world. If there's dispute between man and man, God could supersede. But generally, the law between man and man has to be upheld, and it's our duty as Jews, as a service to God, but also, practical, utilitarian approach that the Torah gives, because the Torah talks a lot about reward and punishment, and simplified, and the prayers talk a lot about punishment of the wicked and reward of the righteous. And a lot of that has to do with having a society that's subservient to the law, and just compassion and caring about people. Obviously, the Sanatokif prayer, and God's going to decide who's going to live and die, and who's going to have pestilence and bad weather, and all of these various things. And the refrain that everyone in the congregation chants is tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah mavirinis gezerah ro, that repentance, prayer, and kindness could rescind the negative degree. And this view that kindness, that likely we did things that caused bad blood and bad karma between man and our fellow man, but we could repent, we could make amends for that.
Right.
And there's the power of charity, prayer, that God could help us out, but also charity and good works. So
Yes.
the Yom Kippur is more God-centered. I mean, because this celebration of the new year and mentioning like God decides everything for the new year, not just our fate, but the fate of the whole material realm, crops and sickness. And then Yom Kippur, we'll focus more on our personal relationship with God and our short fallings. And even Larry King, if you remember back when he was doing interviews, would always mention, like, I'm a Jew, and our tradition holds that you have to God requires us to make amends with our fellow man. It's not enough to just pray to God
That's right.
and
You have to do something on earth.
say, I'm sorry to God for wronging my fellow man. That God can't forgive us, so to say, for wronging our fellow man. We have to make efforts. So definitely very intuitive and thoughtful, a long path for Jews to have a collective society where, like, no, you can't wrong people and get away with it. You have to make amends. And just because you're like a deeply spiritual person who
No, you have
cares.
to do something on earth, and you have to make amends, and you're doing it for yourself as much as for them, because then you may hope, God willing, reach a level where you can have atonement. And one of my other takeaways from Rosh Hashanah this year is that the afterlife, heaven, however that works, in a Judaic understanding, is that that'll take care of itself if you live the good life on earth, if you value every day, every minute on earth, and you strive to know God, to know truths, to glorify God, and to thus do good with others. And maybe there's a slight difference between Judaism and Christianity in this regard, in that for Christianity, I sense that the idea is to know Jesus, which means that you then become a good person, and then you can be saved. But that I think in some, maybe certain, I don't know, maybe extreme Protestant sects, it's not really even necessary to do good. You can be completely evil, but if you believe in Jesus, you're saved. Whereas I think maybe Catholicism is more oriented toward works. You have to conduct a good life in the image of Jesus. Jesus is a mentor in a way, and that if you believe in that, then you will become better, and that you will live a good life. But either way, I think we're both trying to do the same thing, which is to try to understand what's true and false, which is a very difficult process, and then to act accordingly once we have that information, and choose good, and choose God, and glorify God. And then the afterlife will take care of itself. We can deal with this brief blink of an eye that we have here on earth, and that's what we have in front of us, and we can do what we can do with that in our own limited capacity, to do good and to change the world just by being that, and by knowing God.
And we talked a lot about, saying there's a lot of fundamental differences between Judaism and Christianity, where you say, like, no, I mean, we're Jews, we don't believe in the afterlife. And even repair the world is you're saying that the Torah, the Bible, the holidays focus on this world, and messianic vision or resurrection of the dead, repair the world, what we're trying to do to this world. And so much so that scholars could even question whether we as Jews even believe in an afterlife. And if we do, where did we take that from? What other tradition? And how did we anachronize that into our own tradition? And possibly a Christian approach that is much more negative on this world, to say that salvation will not be found in this world. Where the Jews, we believe that salvation could be found in this world, and that we collectively could do something that repairs the world and makes it applicable for Messiah to come, and like a heaven on earth, as opposed to possibly Christian statements that say there is no salvation in the material realm, and any salvation will occur to the soul after death. So does, just to put it out there, to say there possibly is a fundamental difference between the way Jews and Christians look at it. And even you have to ask your local rabbi, do your research, and someone said, like, no, we're Jews, we don't believe in the afterlife.
Well, I'm not sure, as you said earlier, I don't think anybody would flat out say that. I think it's a more subtle thing. We're less oriented toward an anthropomorphic view. It's more complex, it's more subtle.
When we repair the world is possibly a Christian view that the world is irreparable.
Irreparable, whereas we believe that the world is imperfect, but we can do our small part to make it better by being better and by knowing God and knowing truths, and then conveying those things to our fellow human beings, in a voluntary way, and that it's a more subtle belief in an afterlife. We're less anthropomorphic. I mean, the Romans believed, for example, that the Jews were atheists. In fact, the word atheist was what they used to describe the Jews. And that was because we didn't have like a God that was built on like a statue, like a colossus. We didn't worship an image. The Romans worshiped their emperor as a god king, and I think Christianity to a certain extent continues that a little bit, and particularly Roman Christianity. Whereas
even the element like Socrates and the original arguments that there is a soul that survives death, whether to say that, it's too difficult to know. I mean, we could look into the scholarship, whether in ancient Israel or even when the Jews were interacting with the Romans, whether we believe that there was a soul that survived death. And a lot of scholars think that, no, we didn't. Our ancestors didn't actually believe in a soul that survived death. That's not a fundamental part of the Jewish belief system. And that's
Right.
why we focus more on bodily resurrection and resurrection of the dead.
Okay, I mean, we'd have to talk to some Torah scholars about that, but I just mentioned that we tend to be a little bit more subtle in our belief. We're willing to leave.
I mean, how does that hit you as a Jew? Does that bother you if you said that it's either we say no? I mean, that's possible that we don't actually believe in a soul that
Well,
survives death.
I don't know if we don't believe in it. I think we're willing to leave questions like that up to a certain degree of mystery, that some of that is behind the curtain that cannot be pierced until we go to the other world. And
There's no belief that we're required to believe. And you
Right.
say, okay, the rabbis and the Torah and
We're
the
willing
text
to
didn't really
tolerate.
explicitly answer these questions. There's Kabbalists and sages, but our job is to follow the law and to
That's
fill
right.
our daily
That's right.
outcome and what happens to us when we die. Try to be the best person possible and hope for the best. But we're not even going to have answers to that. In the prophets that directed us, you said that wasn't important information for us to know. Like, we have our day-to-day
Right,
life.
and it's a faith of questions. We don't necessarily have the answers. The answers, only God has the answers. I mean, there's a veil of mystery that the human being, and we are images of God. We're not God. We can't cross that, the Rubicon, or maybe in the biblical terms, you can't cross the river Styx to get to the Garden of Eden.
I mean, the
we don't-
Bible, Christianity takes a hard turn on that issue, and
Right.
Jesus flat out says that there's a soul that survives death, and that has causal difference in the way that so to say Christians interact with the world than Jews, who aren't necessarily so certain that there's a soul that survives death.
That's right. And I think that, I mean, I want to avoid any great conversation about Christology here, but I think that Jesus, from my understanding, drew a lot of his wisdom and his faith from the Shammai school, which was a contemporary of him, versus the Hillel school, which is more the rabbinic school, and that they were a little bit more into these very, rather more stark definitions of the afterlife. They were more involved with presenting, answers. And in Jewish tradition, we do not reject the Shammai school. We discuss that. I mean, that's in a way the whole Talmudic process of learning is debate between Hillel and Shammai. In fact, in a Talmudic class, they actually divide it up between Shammai and Hillel, and they debate. So it's not like we reject it, but generally, from the time of the Romans till today, we favor the Hillel side, which is willing to leave questions like this more in a mystery, that we can't know that, and then a way to try to claim that we know that is a form of arrogance that might even border on idol worship.
I think I've said this on the show. I forget the rabbi, although it's commonly said by a bunch of rabbis that a rabbi was teaching his class, and the student questions the rabbi. You said everything that God created has its positive value. What's the positive value of atheism? So the rabbi says, kindness. When you see a person in need, take the quality of an atheist and assume that there may not be a God to help him out, so you have to help him out. So that kind of has a Jewish flavor to it. That you're saying we have an active part in creation in the world. We believe in God and subservient to the God, but God expects us to take an active role. And this concept of when's it good to be an atheist? It's good to be an atheist when you see someone in need, and are going to assume that maybe someone else is going to help them. That you're better off saying that if I don't help them, no one's going to help them, so I better help them.
So then the atheist maybe has more, emphasizes human agency, the ability that since there is no God, according to them, you have to take the initiative yourself. I mean, of course, the darker side of atheism is that if there is no God and there is no external and, in a sense, supernatural source of existence, if everything is man-made, then the atheist can decide what they view as good and evil. But anyway, Dooovid, I want to move on to other topics. I don't know if you saw this video that's gone somewhat viral. It is a video that was leaked, I assume, of the meeting between Israeli Prime Minister Bennett and President Biden. Have you seen that?
No, I saw the one where he was falling asleep, but that wasn't leaked.
Well, that was also leaked, I think, but this is even.
That was actually during the news conference when.
Yeah, that's okay, but and they sort of maybe was screwing up, but this video is even more damning than that. Bennett took him to the woodshed. I mean, he just absolutely was like, Mr. President, and Biden started out with mumbling. I mean, he's barely coherent. He's like, "Oh, our countries have a great relationship," blah blah blah. And Bennett turned to him and he goes, this is right after the Afghanistan thing, don't forget. And he absolutely dressed him down. It's like, this is a terrible destabilization of the world. What the heck are you doing? Don't you understand what this is here? I mean, absolutely Biden just sat there like a child. He looked like he was, who knows what, if he was even, cognizant at that point. In fact, I think I saw a comment from Secretary of State Blinken, kind of made a side comment saying that in his meetings with Joe Biden, he's not even sure Biden knows who he is. I mean, the man is not, doesn't appear to have the cognitive ability at this point. Not that he was ever any great shakes anyways, but I mean, at this stage in his life, he just seems very impaired. And, there is no sense of leadership there. And I know that we have the anniversary of 9/11 coming up. I hope Biden doesn't come out. He shouldn't be involved in it. I mean, it's bad. I mean, he's not in good shape. At least that's how it appears to me. I mean, the whole world has become more destabilized since these terrible events in Afghanistan, where you had tens of billions of dollars worth of American military hardware given over to an enemy that is now not only displaying it, but they've now said that China is their main ally. It's probably at this point, it's in Iran and in China. You've got hostages left behind. They don't want to call them hostages, but that's what they are. And who knows how many that are there. And China is now flying military, weaponry. They're flying airplanes into Taiwanese airspace, and just there's huge instability throughout the world, which tells us why it's important to have a strong American president, or at least an American president that can have some coherent ability to articulate something, some kind of a doctrine. Anyway, I hope I don't get banned for getting that off my chest.
Yeah, I mean, we've disagreed about this. I'm more libertarian. I don't think the decline of American or Western power is necessarily good or bad. The Israeli perspective. I didn't see. I just searched. I follow Israeli news pretty closely. I didn't see a leak, although maybe a video. Maybe people leaked some of the conversation.
That's what it was.
Yeah, I think Iran. I mean, it was mostly about Iran, and Bennett was probably pushing him to do more about Iran, and he was probably talking to a blank wall, according to the Israeli press that Bennett largely lost on Iran. Like so like he got the money, he got the continued military agreements, but he got nothing from Biden on a promise to do anything about Iran. And it looked like almost the opposite, where Bennett had promised to Biden that he wasn't going to publicly try to change American policy on Iran, and I don't think that's going to change. I mean, Blinken is in the Middle East right now, and he's basically saying that Iran is getting closer to a nuclear, the 60% enrichment, or if they're trying to make a weapon, that they could even be weeks away. They could even possibly already have it.
Disaster. Absolutely.
And that
they're
it doesn't look like
American info. Yes.
There's no pressure to re-enter one of these agreements. But I mean, you call it disaster in the sense that, if you're assuming that there could have been a strong America, that we could have done something about it,
Yes,
or that the American people actually had an appetite to do anything about it, which is why I disagree. I'm not so sure we could even do anything about it.
I'm not sure that we had to do something.
And definitely that there's an appetite against it. So if Israel,
I don't think we had to do something actively in terms of getting militarily involved, but we had to have a strong leader that continued the embargo against Iran, for one thing. For another thing, did an organized and normal withdrawal from Afghanistan, which I support and which President Trump supported, but done so in a way that made sure that American military, everything was out of there, and that maybe they held on to the Bagram Air Base, which is now being used by China, and that they got people out before the military left last. That's what would have happened. It would have been organized, and it would have been, it's not that the Taliban wouldn't have taken over, but they would have been left without American help, which is what now they've taken over tens of billions of dollars worth of American, hardware, which is almost like handing them, weapons to use against us.
I mean, the New York Times today said that there's passenger flights going out of Taliban controlled Afghanistan with Americans on it. Like, I haven't seen like anything like hostages or violence against Americans remaining there. I mean, it's even looking like it could be a peaceful transition to power to the Taliban. And I would assume they're gonna have a hard time getting people on board continuing sanctions against Iran. There's probably going to be a reshuffling of world power, and China is probably going to be at the head of it. Russia, questionably, which side it could take. And the question is, how dangerous is Iran really to anybody other than Israel? And so if Bennett is coming there, like, you got to help Israel out because Iran's dangerous to Israel, versus trying to convince America that Iran's dangerous to America. And it's probably going to fall on deaf ears either way. So if it's straight up like, you got to help Israel out because you got to help Israel out, or trying to convince America that that we're not just doing it to help Israel out, we're doing it because it's in our own personal best interest. And so I would guess both of those issues are going to be failures. We've got so much, the COVID-19 trying to reopen up schools, weather, power outages. Michigan just had another 100,000 power outages from another storm. It's probably going to keep on coming. There's the debt ceiling that I would say there's almost zero chance that the U.S. gets seriously involved in any global public policy.
I want to be clear. I would be against any military incursion by the United States, and I don't think Israel was asking for that. If they were asking for that, then they were wrong. I don't support that. But I do think that Israel expected the United States, and I think the same was true with the Saudis and with the other allies that are technically allied with Israel now, to contain Iran, to continue to embargo Iran.
We probably just don't have the power. I mean, internationally, to the sanctions. I'm saying, who do we have? What nations do we have leverage with? You talk like China, Russia, India.
Yes.
Who do we have leverage with to impose sanctions against Iran?
the Saudis, you mentioned India. I think we were probably working with Russia. And the point is that
But I'm saying we don't have leverage over any of those countries to
no, I
impose
think we
sanctions
did.
on
I think we
Iran.
now don't. But I think at the time, the Iranian, the embargo of Iran was beginning to work, and that you saw political movement in Iran. You saw positive development. Not to mention the fact that, we could look back. I mean, Trump has been taken out of office, so that it's almost a moot point. But besides the Abraham Accords and the last minute within a month of his leaving office, the accord with Morocco, I think that the Trump policies were moving Israel and the Middle East in the direction of normalizing relations, and I think that would have included a normalization between Israel and the Palestinian Arabs. I think that if Trump were in office for a second term, and if everything went the way it was supposed to go, or should have gone, frankly, then the Palestinians would have come to the peace table and accepted the Kushner plan, which was the best and most generous plan that they had ever been offered. Now they haven't. Now there's nothing but tension, and now there's nothing but potential war. But anyway,
Yeah, I mean, it's not looking good for
no.
the
And that's
tide
because of a
with
lack
what
of
happened in
leadership or a
Afghanistan.
very fuzzy.
And I could see Bennett's a U.S. citizen. He might have, he's a self-made millionaire. He might have kind of like just been Netanyahuing and yelling and trying to explain things to deaf ears on Biden. But no, I mean, I would say Israel is probably going to be in a difficult international situation. I'm saying Israel has, like winning the larger chess game, selling weapons or the various diplomatic ends, but it looks like tide in the Middle East is it's probably moving back away against Israel with the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I mean, I saw in the Israeli papers, it said that the Taliban said the only country that they weren't going to have diplomatic relationships with is Israel, and even the last Jew in Afghanistan finally
jump ship
left. I mean, but I mean, Iran right now, I think is getting hit really hard with COVID-19. I mean, even if they move towards nuclear weapons, Afghanistan, they're not going to be in any situation. I mean, there was that prison escape in Israel, and
that's interesting.
It's tough to see. I mean, Israel's in a pretty good situation, relative to its neighbors and enemies, but to be at a constant state of war and a necessity to be up on like continuing bombing Syria and sites and weapon transfers, that God forbid it's probably going to escalate, but none of those countries have any power really to destabilize Israel. So it's more a question of Russia, and Russia is probably purposely trying to weaken America by playing double-sided with Israel, like keeping Assad in power or limiting the amount that Israel could do to because Russia probably looks at Israeli military activity in the Middle East as more furtherance of American interests. That, I mean, maybe Israel, but so Russia probably strategically is trying to limit the amount of military activity that Israel could do, because they figured that increases American power. So weakening Israel weakens America's international power, which is probably accurate in why the Russians might be making strategic moves like that.
I think that's a reasonable assumption. Although the big player, I think, on the world stage is China, and but I want to go to a.
And China's relatively. I mean, besides the fact that China is extremely unlikely to abide by sanctions against Iran, China's probably relatively neutral and has pretty good ties, with Israel due to technology and international, finance. So I think the status quo is probably sustainable for Israel in terms of like constant war, constant tit for tat, bombing, weapon transfers, and various things. And it's unlikely, Russia or China isn't going to, they're not going to take the side, so to say, the enemies of Israel, but they are going to slow it down and make it more difficult to for largely based on the U.S. that they figure what's good for Israel might be good for the U.S. So just to limit what Israel does in strengthening itself against its Arab neighbors. But like, no, I mean, China has some interest, like Lebanon. I think maybe they controlled the port in Lebanon and Africa.
Right. Mhm.
But no, I mean, it's unlikely that China is going to turn against Israel, and relatively China is probably a decent ally. I was talking last week that Israel is even possibly likely to pivot east towards China. They're
Could
saying
be.
they're not going to get anywhere with Biden and the
No,
U.S.
that's
And long term, Russia's their immediate neighbor. So having good terms with Russia in terms like what's happening in Syria and Lebanon could be more important than what's happening with the U.S., especially if the U.S. has as waning global power and moving forward international business with China could become even more important than international business with the U.S., even with the millions of Jews that are still here in America.
Now, I want to ask you about an issue that is, well, it's sensitive for YouTube. Let's just put it that way. I mean, this is one of the forbidden topics. So we have to kind of do a walk around it. In Michigan, there is a new candidate for Secretary of State, Kristina Karamo. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's a lawyer. I mean, she happens to be a Black woman, just for the record. Not that that is a big matter, but it does in this case. It matters. And she claims to have witnessed, let's just say, voter improprieties on November 3rd in Detroit, where she lives. I don't want to go further than that because, again, this is a verboten topic here. She is running for Secretary of State against whom I would argue is a very corrupt Secretary of State, being Jocelyn Benson. Now, Benson was refused to investigate voter improprieties, as we say, in Detroit, in spite of the fact that there were hundreds of affidavits claiming that there were problems, and in spite of a real outcry on the part of the public. She just slammed the door on it. And she also was making laws with regard to voting before the election that were not within her purview as Secretary of State, because Article 2 of the Constitution says that only the state's elected House can make voter regulation. They decide when there's an audit, they decide how the vote takes place, they decide everything to do with voting within the context of the US Constitution. And she overturned one of the state laws by saying that you no longer had to do a signature verification for absentee ballots, that you could just simply pass it through. Now, who was passing it through? That's an interesting question. But the point is that it violated the laws of the state of Michigan. And 4 months after the election, a state judge ruled that as such and threw that out and put her laws out of sight. And there may be other things that she had done before the election, acting as Secretary of State, which went above and beyond her purview in that office, and which may have circumvented the lawful and legal authority of the state House, the Senate and the House of Representatives. And so she's trying to hold on to that office. And I just want to say that Kristina Karamo is going to be attacked for running. And I think it's going to be interesting to see the nature of that attack. I think we can almost predict what it will be. You know, she'll be called, right wing and all that stuff, QAnon, who knows. I hope that she has a chance. She's going up against the deep state, in my opinion. She's going against this corrupt government that's running your state, one of the worst, in my opinion. Do you know anything about her, Dooovid?
I just looked her up as you were talking. I read the Detroit papers. I look at the Free Press, and news and even smaller periodicals daily, at least online. My mother gets the Free Press physically. They only deliver it now on weekends because the papers decline so much. It's hard to even get the print copies of papers, and they hardly talk about it.
Yes, she's being suppressed. Her comments. I mean, look, this is what we're talking about. We're on YouTube here. We're worried about the censorship. I am anyway.
I doubt
And
Benson is particularly popular. I'm saying that we talked about that
she
before.
is or she isn't.
Well, she's probably not even that well known or popular among the states. Secretary of State isn't a big election, saying that she, we talked about her history, the Harvard Law School and the SPLC, and she had an agenda that she wanted to carry out, and whether African Americans believe that she was some like saint working on their behalf, I would seriously doubt that that like Hillary Clinton or something, like, is she really a hero to African Americans? I doubt it. Like I don't see. I've never seen like African Americans talking about what great person Jocelyn Benson is and
Good.
how much she did for them. She wanted to take down Trump. That's what she probably even ran for Secretary of State with the explicit purpose of
very
taking
openly,
down Trump.
That's why she got the support from various groups we shall not mention and various people we shall not mention. And these same groups and people supported secretaries of states in all of these states that had alleged voter improprieties. And a lot of these secretaries of states did similar things to what Jocelyn Benson
she
did.
could move on to.
They started to make laws before the election that helped Biden. And they did so unconstitutionally because Secretary of State doesn't have that kind of authority. Only the state Senate and state House, Article 2 of the US Constitution, has that authority. Now they're reasserting that authority. They should have had it in the first place, and they're being accused of voter suppression. Anyway.
Yeah, I would assume that she would want to move on to something bigger. And I mean, she already had, was working for Stephen Ross, giving away a billionaire's money before she ran, and Secretary of State, Ross? She may have already done what she wanted to do. That the position,
her role has been, she's it's sort of like she did the deed, the election's over, big success. Now she'll probably get some fat job somewhere in some foundation or some whatever, where she'll make a few bucks.
I can't even like raising. I mean, she probably has been able to raise a bunch of money, but does it even make sense to raise a ton of money for the politicization of Secretary of State, where she's going to say it's so important to donate money and vote for her as Secretary of State so that she could keep on.
I think her role may not, the powers that be. I mean, what President Trump called the deep state, we could call it whatever we want. I think that they probably are not finished with her as Secretary of State because there still could be questions raised. I mean, there still could be an audit. I hope that word doesn't get me in trouble. There still could be things that could happen.
But I mean, 2022, that they want to keep her in that position.
Well, the thing is that she loses
to prevent an audit in 2022.
And if somebody like Kristina Karamo steps in, that could maybe create some momentum in the direction of having things looked at.
Maybe, but I mean, just
now, I'm not saying,
even if they look at it and find it like you're not going to overturn they're not going to overturn the election 3 years after it happened.
No, and I'm not calling for that. And nor am I, just for the YouTube censors, I am not saying there even were improprieties. I have no idea. All I'm saying is that Kristina Karamo in that office and some other people, they may institute or they may initiate investigations to see whether there might have been improprieties. Maybe they'll find that there were none. I don't know. All I know is that there might be reasons why the establishment wants to keep Jocelyn Benson in place because they don't want to have anyone consider looking into this. Not that there were. That's a question. See, that's just it. We don't know for sure. All I'm asking is that we find out. I think that you've got 60% of the American people of Republicans who have been polled consistently from election day till now, believe that there might have been some problems with the election. And those are the only ones who are willing to stand up and answer that question to a pollster. I think the number is probably a lot larger than that. Now it's probably about 30% of Democrats, and I think the number is larger there too. People are afraid to come out and say something. But the point is that given that atmosphere, there should be an investigation, probably in all 50 states, so that we can then know that the election was fine. Let there be the investigation and let's get to the truth. And if the truth is that this was the greatest election in history, fine, let it be. And if it wasn't, no one's saying that there should be any kind of a change in administration. I'm not saying that. The President Biden was inaugurated, that's that. There have been presidents who probably have been inaugurated under more questionable circumstances than Biden.
And people have more.
He is the president.
Whitmer is becoming less popular, just like Biden, because of pressing issues, because of 10% of Michigan lost power for a few days, like power outages. COVID-19 is right back, and it possibly is going to be worse than it's been. It's unclear whether schools are going to reopen. Gas prices increasing, food prices
schools reopening
increasing.
They are in Massachusetts.
Unemployment insurance. I mean, surprising that it was still going on till last week. Unemployment insurance. Right. It's over. That she's becoming less and less popular. And I mean, you might care about the election, but I don't think the electorate is going to care about the election. But saying if they can't keep our power on, and they can't get schools to reopen, and the economy just keeps on having problems, rising gas prices and food prices, and government aid dwindling, that all of them will be weak. But
it's like
maybe someone like you will care about election integrity, but no, it's not even in the papers.
It's suppressed. And there are a lot of people who do care about it. But the point is that ultimately, as former Massachusetts Governor Frank Sargent once said, when they asked why he lost, and he was a popular governor, he was the last of the Yankee governors in Massachusetts. His answer was, it's the price of hamburger. And that's what it comes down to on an election, the price of hamburger. Anyway, speaking of which, and this is maybe a little bit more, of a philosophical discussion, and it's more anecdotal on my part.
I mentioned Chief Craig, that the chief police from Detroit, who is running as a Republican, possibly against Whitmer, and that might be be
like an Eric Adams, like a Democrat who actually cares about policing.
Well, Eric Adams is a Democrat, by saying
he is a Democrat. Oh, he's a guy's Republican, but
he's come out as a Republican.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll have a tough
Larry
time.
Elder, who's running in the recount election in California. I don't know if you saw the video of this white woman with a gorilla mask throwing eggs at him.
I saw that I didn't look at it, but I saw that.
Is she a white supremacist? I kind of wonder. There she is with a stereotypical anti-black racist costume.
Our society's collapsing too much. I mean, these things might be funny or humorous, but I mean, just like we can't keep our power on, I think that I wonder in so many other ways, infrastructure.
If this should be portrayed as white supremacy, but I have a feeling it won't be, because Larry Elder's a Republican. But that gets me to my next thoughts here, Dooovid. Since Biden is now president and Kamala Harris is vice president, and we've gone back to the status quo before Trump, we're back to the days of Obama and the Bushes and Clinton, and pretty much everything has gone back to normal, and even worse in my opinion, but some people may celebrate. Why then, and again, this is anecdotal on my part, maybe some people may have some thoughts about this, they could maybe put it in the column, they can even call, by the way, you can call the program live here, 617-396-4958, we could take a call. Why is it that liberals that I have encountered recently are more crazed than ever? They're more frenzied than ever They're more deranged than ever in their rage and in their hatred. I mean, they got what they wanted. Trump is gone. Trump is no longer in office. They've got their wonderful government back. And yet they've gone further off the deep end. They're more hateful. And again, I will note that this is anecdotal on my part. This is my own experience with liberal family members and liberal friends and people that are in my world, and most of whom are liberal. I have to be very careful. I'm almost like a secret conservative, I mean, I've had to change my name to do this program, quite frankly. So I come across this and I encounter it, and they seem more crazy than ever. It's like, what is going on here? What do you think? Am I onto something, or is this something that is just my own imagination?
I said like a year ago, I mean, the country's already collapsed and they just haven't told us yet. And, they're trying to keep it a secret, but you're saying like, no, I mean, they won the elections, but there's really nothing there, like being ushered into power of our failing government, just trying to give away the last sums of money till our government's no longer creditworthy to borrow money to give away, and the incompetence. So
maybe Michael Savage is right. Liberalism is a mental disease. These
I don't know if it's a
people
mental.
are insane.
It might
They're
be some sort of
friggin'
idealism or just a hope that things are going to be better, and then
Fine, but they have what they want
and
now.
then it's
They're
like
back to the
I mean, God forbid, it's like
government. They got rid of the evil
I
orange
mean, it's like
man. I mean, you're back to
anti-Semitism.
power.
You need a scapegoat, and just like
Maybe
the
that's why they're going crazy.
incompetence in so the scapegoat because failed policy or inability to beat COVID-19 is just these people who won't get vaccinated, even though
So then
according
it's
to
the
most of the logic, it
non-vaccinated
doesn't
people.
have
That's
anything
the
to
new
do
enemy.
with the people who failed to get vaccinated. If the vaccine works so well, then the people who aren't getting vaccinated are only putting ourselves at risk.
I don't want to talk about
but
that
it's
issue
all
too
this
much,
like to
because I
fail to
will get
blame
censored.
other people,
Yeah,
for a
let's not go
scapegoat.
there.
And the liberals are just classic human nature, that things aren't going the way that they want, and they're going to blame
But
other,
first of all,
other people for.
let's not
for
go
it.
to the vaccine. I mean, that's a sensitive topic. Just for the record, I've had the vaccine. But the point is
But
that
it's the one thing that you're openly allowed to diss on people, just to trash on people,
I guess,
and to blame, like
and
why
then to
didn't
they blame the South, or they blame the Trump supporters, and
Mhm.
maybe that's the way to keep Trump alive, even though Trump actually spearheaded the
I mean,
creation.
we could go
of
back
that.
to lockdowns and mask mandates and saying like, no, but
I
we're
don't
going
think
to
that. Yeah, I don't think that's
scapegoat
right.
the people who don't want to get the vaccine. But I mean, it's like that with
The American people are
every
gonna
issue of
tolerate
major
that.
policy, where there were a bunch of promises that were made. Anybody who really understood policy knew that they were just
think the
vain
American
promises that
people-
wouldn't work. And now that the vain promises, Biden's almost, it's been almost a year already, and the promises aren't working. So they're going to say the reason is because it's these other people's fault. And
These other people, they need to have the scapegoat. I think that's probably true.
you're
And I-
roboting a little bit. I'm not sure if your connection's fading.
For the record, I think that people are going to tolerate that it's unstable. Are you okay?
Yeah, I think I'm fine. I'm not sure if you froze for a second. You were a
let's-
little slow there.
Yeah, there was like a moment of something going on. Anyways, I don't think the American people are going to tolerate another lockdown. I don't think that. I know that Australia is almost like a police state right now. They won't even allow you to get a bottle of liquor for the Great Reset. I don't want to get into that. I'll get banned. Let's go back to the derangement that I'm seeing. They're looking for a scapegoat. You're quite right. They're going to blame the South. They're going to blame, unvaccinated people. In a way, they're trying to recreate Trump, even though he's gone. And they need someone to hate. This is the whole movement is based on an irrational.
We say
and
hate, or they need someone to
unarticulated
blame
hate.
for their
These
failures.
people are sick. They're
You're saying a
haters.
derangement, like they're
Yeah,
hating
that's
for no reason, or they just need to blame someone for their failures as opposed to taking
Or
responsibility.
it's an ideology that's based on hate, because it's an ideology that at its core is not based upon truths. It's not based on reality. So in order to keep this artificial construct functioning, you need this constant stimulus of an external enemy that is trying to destroy you. It's like this, that they live this conspiratorial view that somehow they have to be, someone's trying to destroy this edifice and that they can focus their hatred on that. And the whole thing is based on, these people are haters. You can just see it. They're so unhappy and twisted and miserable. Their faces are contorted with rage. They go into these hysterical, frenzies of hate. I mean, I've seen this in terms of, look, I am an open conservative. I mean, I ran for office in Massachusetts as a conservative. So I mean, everybody knows who I am, who knows me. And people used to say, Chuck, we don't agree with you. We think you're wrong, but they'd have a reasonable conversation. There'd be some, you always had the haters who couldn't tolerate me, but there was some level of civility. Now they cannot tolerate my very existence. I mean, and they don't know who I am. They're filled with such rage and they don't know why. There's nothing really that you can hang a hat on. They despised Donald Trump for reasons that they could never really say. There's no ration. I mean, either they bought into the gigantic media campaign that was launched against him, but yet these people aren't stupid enough for that. They understand, they're a little bit more sophisticated. They've been a part of it. I mean, this is why I think that, well, I don't want to get into the election, but I think that they're capable of doing anything to further their agenda. And they're capable of feeling good about it because they feel that their entire existence depends on this destroying this external hatred, this hate monster that they've created and that their media figures have articulated. And so therefore they feel perfectly justified to do anything to stop it because they need to stop it in their own heads. They can't stand the noise that's permeating from the outside.
Yeah, I'm not a hateful person. Generally I'm right leaning because I believe in personal responsibility. I feel the hatred. I'm not sure if it's just on the left or liberals. To me, it's more decline of empire and struggling over diminishing resources that, times are good. There's, more bounty, just Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And as, people's needs are more in jeopardy, that, God forbid, people are going to turn against each other. That's just how I see human nature, that I don't think it's anything that complicated.
That's interesting. I don't think that there is I suppose that we're being threatened with scarcity right now, but I don't think that's real. I think that apparently Kamala Harris actually made some comments while she was in Vietnam about telling people they should buy their Christmas toys early because there's going to be scarcity. Maybe that's the next thing coming down the pike. Maybe that's going to be the new part of the Great Reset. I don't know. But the thing is, in reality, I think it's bigger than that. It's bigger than any one issue. It's something that's going on in their psyche. They're twisted, and they cannot. When you construct a false god, as it were, and a false set of beliefs, you have a tendency to want to destroy anything that might interrupt that. Because if you see some truths, you may have to disavow that which you've spent your entire life supporting and building. And it might make you look within and question who you are. And if you have to do that, you might be horrified to find out that there's nobody home. Anyway, Dooovid, I want to wrap it up because I want to download the show to Rumble and Gab and Minds and all these other sites, and they don't let me do a full hour. So what do you have coming up, Dooovid?
It's the Jewish holiday season. Next Thursday is actually Yom Kippur. And, said that, I'm not there to worry about other people's sins. I'm there to worry about my sins.
Yes.
I'm not worried about, I am worried, but other people reconciling their problems with other people. I focus on myself reconciling my problems with other people. So I guess next Thursday we'll probably take a break for Yom Kippur and then be back after that. So not much streaming, and I'm not even really following the politics that much. I want to focus on little spiritual and And like I said, to some extent, really all we could do is just man our post and try our best. Like even if the ship's sinking, at some point we might have to bail. But as of now, like the best we could do is probably just man our post. And it's tough to know the information. It's really hard to get good information. And then even just looking at why you're looking for this information, it's threatening to people clinging to power. But I think on a small level, neighborhoods and institutions are resilient, and hopefully we could pull through this. And as a libertarian, like if the government collapses, to me that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So just going to
Well, I mean,
focus.
I don't think it's a good thing. I support the government. I am optimistic. I hope that the censors, and now I'm afraid, I'm thinking, oh, they're going to take the show down. What did I say? You have to, in this day and age, you have to worry about that. You're wondering if there's something that I said that's forbidden. All I can say is that, just to be clear, I recognize the present government. I recognize Biden is president. Kamala Harris is vice president. They were sworn in. They were inaugurated. However it happened, they are there, and I'm not calling for them to be in any way removed or in any way molested in any way. I support them because I support the union. I support our government, and that is our government. And I pray for them, and I pray for the future of our country. I pray for their success. They are there, and I want them to be successful. So I want that to be clear to
Right, but I mean, through personal responsibility in our own relationships without reliance on government or other forces, saying that we can
Right.
take our destiny into our own hands, and say that I'm not anti-government, but
Not at
no, I
all.
mean, I think if the US government fell and collapsed, that it would actually improve the lives of the majority of US citizens.
No, I don't believe that. I think that I support our government as it is. I want to work within it to make it better, and I pray for its success. Anyway, Dooovid, I also want to mention, since my program is self-sponsored, that the best way to support the show is to check out my books. My books are available at Amazon Books. My latest book still is The Satanic Conspiracy. Let me just hold that up.
How's your progress on the next one on critical race theory?
Well, it's going well. I'm writing a book because I'm a student of sociology. I am writing a short book of essays that present a conservative sociology. Sociology has been primarily a left thing. It was created that one of the patron saints of sociology is Karl Marx, and generally has served left interests. So I'm hoping to present an alternative hypothesis. I'm presenting a conservative sociology that I hope leads to other more intelligent people than me and more experienced people going deeper and doing some greater research and really developing a school of sociology that is conservative. So that's what I'm working on. Anyway, Dooovid, listen, thank you for joining me. Happy New Year, Lashana Tova, and have a good one.